Carlos Ramirez, owner of NVS Audio in Roselle, New Jersey. So finally, after a week or two of testing, I finally have the results of the Euphoria xpert EX10 NMB CF versus the Ds18 Pro RY10.4 NMB. To be honest, going into the test, I didn't expect much from the Ds18 woofer, only because Euphoria xpert is known to be a powerhouse in the motorcycle competition industry. A lot of people use them, a lot of people win with them, so they are the undisputed champion. A lot of people were accusing Ds18 of just copying the speaker and offering at a cheaper price. When I initially looked at the speakers and compared them, they looked very similar, but as you dive deeper in, you realize that the speakers are built a little bit differently, and it did affect the way the speakers perform. The things that the speakers do have identical and the same is they're both carbon fiber cone, rubber surround, they're both 3-inch voice coil. So something that confused me a little bit is the way that the two companies chose to rate the woofers. So Ds18 chose to rate their woofer a conservative 450 watts RMS to 900 watts peak. Euphoria xpert chose to rate theirs at 800 watts RMS, 1600 watt peak. I understand why Euphoria did it this way, and I understand why Ds18 did it that way. Euphoria decided to rate it since they knew they were going to be used in small saddlebags. Once you put a woofer in a enclosure that is small, it causes the impedance of the woofer to rise, and it causes the amplifier to do less power. So let's say you have an impedance rise of 16 ohms. The amplifier is going to be putting out a quarter of the possible power that it could put out. So I like the way Euphoria rated it, because in our results, we ran them on a 5,000 watt amp and we ran them on a 3,000 watt amp. A 3,000 watt amp loaded all the way down would net you around 1,500 watts per woofer. And that's exactly where we ran them. The woofer is very comfortable at that power level. So with the Ds18, to push the woofer to its limit, if you only hook it up to 1,000 watt amp peak, that's 450 watts RMS, then double it times 2, so it'd be 2,000 watts peak and 1,000 watts RMS. These woofers will not be getting full power, in my opinion. So I tested them on a 5,000.1, and then I tested them on a 3,000.1. So bear in mind that a 5,000.1 is more than 3-4 times the amount of power Ds18 recommends, and it's double the amount of power that the Euphoria xpert recommends. So it didn't work out too good for either woofer. On the 5,000.1, the woofers lasted less than 2 minutes. In both woofers' defense, the enclosure was a little over a cubic foot, and neither of the woofers like working in an enclosure that big. So I wanted to really test the limits and see if either of the woofers would survive, and they did not. So you'll see it later on in the video. I smoked both the woofers. I loaded in a fresh pair of woofers, dialed down the power, and both woofers did really well. Something that was unique to Euphoria, because they use a neomagnet, neomagnets have their advantages and disadvantages. So neomagnets are lighter and stronger if you compare it to the same amount of ferrite. So if you have a ferrite magnet, it's the same weight as a neomagnet. The neomagnet's way, way, way more powerful. So speakers that are neomagnet could have a magnet appear stronger, but they have more magnetic force than a ferrite. Both these speakers are neomagnet. So something that was unique to the Euphoria speakers, once they start to get hot, they start to smell. Anybody that's installed a set of Euphoria xpert carbon and hit them with a lot of power knows that after a few minutes, you can smell the speaker. It smells like the speaker's burning up. It's actually the Neo creates so much heat that you're smelling the epoxy on the cone heating up. The Ds18, since it's made out of similar materials, does exactly the same thing. So you get that Euphoria smell on the Ds18 also when you're hitting it hard. So it's something about the carbon fiber and the epoxy and the neomagnet, so it's not unique to Euphoria anymore. Both woofers had 3-inch voice coils, so they both handle the same amount of power. There's a $300 price difference between the two. Retail on Euphoria xpert is $900. Retail on the Ds18 is $600. But I immediately noticed differences on the paperwork, and when I went to test them, I immediately noticed the difference in the test. So it seems like the team over at Euphoria xpert spent a little more time in research and development, and they gave the woofer a few small advantages. And I guess to copy these small features would not made it cost effective in the DS18, so they choose not to do these things. The first thing is the mounting depth. So according to the paperwork, the Euphoria xpert is 4.6 inches deep. The DS18 is 5.6. I measured more of a 3/4 inch difference than a 1 inch difference, but it is deeper, and it did make a difference on these bags. Since the bags are fiberglass and reinforced in the back, I had to add a 3/4 inch spacer to get the DS18 to fit. The Euphoria dropped right in because 4.6, 4.7 is what we had in depth. We did not have 5.6 in depth, so I had to run a spacer for the DS18. So if you're running narrow bags, the Euphoria woofer might be the woofer for you, because that extra 3/4 of an inch to an inch might make all of the difference in mounting. Plus, you also don't want to block off the vent hole in the back of the speaker if you could avoid it. These neo magnets get hot, like I mentioned before, so these woofers need to breathe even more than a ferrite magnet woofer. The other advantage is the Euphoria xpert is a 3 ohm woofer. So it averages about 4 ohms when it's playing, but that little 1 ohm difference gives you extra power, especially when the rise of the enclosure, the impedance rise of being in a small enclosure is going to bring you up. They started with lower impedance. That way, they're going to be 1 ohm lower, so the amplifier is going to do a little more power than the DS18, because the DS18 is a 4 ohm coil. So in the test, we noticed that the Euphoria xpert played a little bit louder on less power, and that's because it's got 2 advantages. One, it's got an extra ohm of lower impedance, which makes the amplifier put a little more power out. And 2, it is also has a sensitivity of 92, which is much higher than the sensitivity of the DS18, which is 89. So in theory, on paper, that 3 dB difference would make the xpert a considerably amount louder with the same power applied. So you would have to run a few hundred watts more to the DS18 to get it to play as loud as Euphoria xpert at certain frequencies, depending on the enclosure and everything created equal in a perfect world. It might be no big deal, because let's say you were considering running a 1600 watt amp, you run a 3000 watt amp, so now you have the extra power than you need. But if you're putting the woofers head to head, that clearly gives the Euphoria xpert a little bit of an advantage. But is that advantage worth $600 a pair more? That's not up to me to decide. That's up to you to decide. But the mounting depth would be more important to me, because that means I can run it in more bags. So that's 2 points I got to give to the Euphoria xpert woofer. I like the fact that the impedance is a little bit lower. I like the fact that it's got a higher sensitivity. And I like the fact that I can fit it in more bags. Now, for a $600 price difference for a pair is not a little bit of money. That's literally the money that you could use to buy the amplifier to run them. So DS18 gets the advantage on the price, because if you're doing a build and you're talking 1200 watts for woofers versus 1800 watts for woofers, leaves a lot of money left over to buy the amplifier to push the woofers. So if you're on a budget, the woofers both performed really well. When I overpowered them, they both blew up at the same time. When I ran them on the proper amount of power, they both survived. They both did well. At full power, the Euphoria did play 1 dB louder, but they were neck and neck along the way. But you also have to remember the test. To make the test as fair as possible, I dropped both these woofers, and an enclosure was not built for either woofer. So I wanted them both to have the same disadvantages. So that 1 dB of difference would go away if you did a good job in designing the enclosure and the port and the power for the DS18. But according to my test, everything on the xpert did just a little bit better. I like the fact that it pulled a little more power from the amplifier. I like the fact that it did more with the available amplifier power, because it's more sensitive. It was just so I thought that Euphoria xpert was completely going to run away with this test, and they did not. They, in my opinion, they outperformed the DS18, but they did not demolish or destroy. Or I think both woofers sounded really good in these bags, and They would have both survived the 5K if I was playing music instead of test tones. What blew the woofers up is I wasn't playing music. I was doing a sine sweep, so that's full 100% power, and it's sustained for a long time as it goes down the, so it's not a fair test. So on music, both woofers on a 5K would have survived. But on test tones, both woofers took the 3,000 watt amp, which gave each woofer roughly 1,500 watts apiece before impedance rise. So that's over the rated power that they're supposed to. It's literally double the rated power on the peak side of the DS18, and right around the rated power that the XPert claims are woofers. So I don't think that my results are going to make it any easier for you to purchase, because both woofers sounded really, really good. Both woofers are expensive. $900 each, $600 each is not cheap. Really expensive woofers, but they perform really well. Now that I've tested, I see why Jay Ford does so well with these woofers, and we already know what Scott Owens does with the Euphoria drivers. But I just wanted to put the information out there. You can't go wrong picking either woofer. The Euphoria XPert line is a more complete line. I think the DS18 line currently has a high power carbon 8-inch coax, high power 6.5-inch coax, and then they also have these 8s and these 10s to go with it. I'm not sure which amplifiers they recommend for the motorcycle line, because I don't think they have an amplifier powerful enough. As a matter of fact, let me pause the video and check. I'm pretty sure they don't have an amplifier powerful enough that would actually fit in a fairing or the tour pack like the 4 amps, but I'm going to check right now. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm on their website now, and under the motorcycle line, the only amplifier that I feel would be powerful enough to push a set of these 10s would be the ZXI 1XL, but the amp's pretty large. It's 15 inches by 6 inches by 2 inches, so obviously it'd be a tour pack mount, but to be fair, none of the Euphoria amplifiers are small either. So this will give you 2200 watts RMS into 1 ohm. See, the issue with that is you have a pair of 4 ohm drivers, so this amplifier is gonna into a 2 ohm load, it's gonna give you 1500 watts, so 750 watts per woofer. Amplifier takes 0 gauge in, so I'm assuming it really does these numbers. But that is the amplifier I guess they designed to run a pair of these. I don't see anything else in the line that would fit in the tour pack and can create over 1500 watts RMS, which is what these woofers would need to get the kind of output that I got on my test. And Euphoria, obviously Euphoria makes a 3000, which would work wonderfully on these woofers. They also make a 5000. So those are my results. Both woofers did really, really well. Both handle an insane amount of power. No matter which one you use, if you build the enclosure properly, you tune it properly, you put the right board on it, either one of these woofers is going to do really good. But if I had to pick one, if I had to grade them on a scale, I give Euphoria XPert an A-, and I give the DS18 a B+. I think that's as fair as I could be. It's just the mounting depth is my biggest thing. Also, the Euphoria XPert free air, not an enclosure, free air. The XPert plays a little bit lower. It's got an FS, a resonant frequency of 41. The DS18 has an FS resonant frequency of 47. So just all of these small little advantages lead me to give the Euphoria XPert an A-. And the DS18 did really, really, really well. But you know, they were just a half step behind, in my opinion, in every category. But it still gets a B+. I think I can make any bike sound really good running either one of these woofers. So you should be able to do the same. Hope my information helps. Check out the videos of me beating up on both of these woofers. Definitely didn't like that.
Pink noise with all high bits.
Well, you can't say I'm not fair in my test. I blew both woofers. So I guess maybe we shouldn't test them on a 5K, doing sine sweeps. So I guess I got to load up another set and try them on a 3K. I blew them both up.
$55 cycles. $56 cycles.